flames and set them dancing. Hail the sun and hail to life. Feed the flames and set them dancing. Hail the sun and hail to life. Spear of fire burns so brightly as the sun wheel in the sky. Spear of fire burn within me. O Hiu Norsha, O Lunasa.
Greetings, Earthlings, and welcome again back to the Earth, our mud fossil Gaia. This is one of my favorite videos. If you're not familiar with it, this is Mudmen by Pink Floyd. I thought this would give a great perspective to the story I'm about to share with you. Something big happened here, that's for sure, and everybody's trying to figure out, is it creatures or is it buildings? Because the mountains sure don't seem to be what they've led us on to believe. So let me share with you what the indigenous people here have to tell us about what may have happened here, at least in North America, anyway. So let me share with you this Zuni legend. The search for the middle in the hardening of the world. As it was with the first men and creatures, so it was with the world. It was young and unripe. Earthquakes shook the world and rent it. Demons and monsters of the underworld fled forth. Creatures became fierce beasts of prey, and others turned timid, becoming their quarry. Wretchedness and hunger abounded in black magic. Fear was everywhere among them, so the people, in dread of their precious possessions, became wanderers, living on the seeds of grass, eaters of dead and slain things. Yet guided by the beloved twain, they sought in the light and under the pathway of the sun, the middle of the world, over which alone they could find the earth at rest. When the tremblings grew still for a time, the people paused at the first of sitting places. Yet they were still poor and defenseless and unskilled, and the world still moist and unstable. Demons and monsters fled from the earth in times of shaking and threatened wanderers. Then the two took counsel of each other. The elders said the earth must be made more stable for men and the valleys where the children rested. If they sent down their firebolts of thunder, aimed at all four regions, the earth would heave up and down, fire would belch over the world and burn it. Floods of hot water would sweep over it. Smoke would blacken the daylight, but the earth would be, at last, safer for men. So the beloved twain let fly the thunderbolts. The mountains shook and trembled, the plains cracked and crackled under the floods and fires, and the hollow places, the only refuge of men and creatures, grew black and awful. At last, thick rain fell, putting out the fires. Then water flooded the world, cutting deep trails through the mountains and burying or uncovering the bodies of things and beings. Where they huddled together and were blasted, thus their blood gushed forth and flowed deeply, here in rivers and there in floods, for gigantic were they. But the blood was charred and blistered and blackened by the fires into the black rocks of the lower mesas. There were vast plains of dust, ashes and cinders reddened like the mud of the hearth place. Yet many places behind and between the mountain terraces were unharmed by the fires. And even then, green grew trees and the grasses, and even flowers bloomed. Pockets of survival, the mesas, cliff dwellings. I think so. Then the earth became more stable and drier, and its lone places less fearsome, since monsters of prey were changed to rock. It tells us what happened. They let fly their thunderbolts, and there were small pockets of survival. It says right here, many places behind and between the mountain terraces were unharmed. So there were pockets of survival. Okay, now they continue on trying to find this middle place. Again, the world rumbled, and they traveled into a country, to a place called Where Tree Poles Stand in the Midst of Waters. There's a typo there, because I've read this in another book. There they remained long, saying, "This is the middle." They built homes there. At times they met people who had gone before. Hohokam, people who were there before. And thus they learned war. And many strange things happened there, as told in speeches of ancient talk. Then when the earth groaned again, the twain bade them to go forth. And they murmured. Many refused and perished miserably in their own homes, as do rats in falling trees or flies in forbidden food. But the greater number went forward, until they came to steam mist in the midst of waters. And they saw the smoke of men's hearth fires, and many houses scattered over the hills before them. More survivors. When they came nearer, they challenged the people, rudely, demanding who they were and why they were there. For in their last standing place, they had touch of war. "We are the people of the seed," said the men of the hearth fires, "born elder brothers of ye, and led of the gods." "No," said our fathers, "we are led of the gods, and we are the people of the seed." Long lived the people in the town on the sunrise slope of the mountains of Kaluanlawan, until the earth began to groan warningly again. Loath were they to leave the place of the Kaka and the lake of their dead, but the rumbling grew louder, and the twain beloved called, and all together they journeyed eastward, seeking once more the place of the middle. But they grumbled amongst themselves, so when they came to a place of great promise, they said, "Let us stay here. Perhaps it may be the place of the middle." So they built houses there, larger and stronger than ever before, and more perfect, for they were strong in numbers and wiser. Though yet unperfected as men, they called the place of sacred stealing. Interesting. Long they dwelt there happily, but growing wiser and stronger, so that with their tails and dressed in the skins of animals, they saw they were rude and ugly. In chase or in war they were at a disadvantage, for they met older nations of men with whom they fought. No longer feared the gods and monsters, but only their own kind. So therefore the gods called a council. "Changed shall be ye, O our children," cried the twain. "Ye shall walk straight in the pathways, clothed in garments, and without tails, that ye may sit more straight in council, and without webs on your feet or talons on your hands." So the people were arranged in procession like dancers, and the twain with their weapons and fires of lightning short off the forelocks hanging down over their faces, severed the talons and slitted their webbed fingers and toes. Sore was the wounding, and loud cried the foolish, when lastly the people were arranged in procession for the raising of their tails. Those who stood at the end of the line, shrinking farther and farther, fled into terror, climbing trees and high places with loud chatter, wandering far, sleeping ever in treetops in the faraway summer land. They are sometimes seen of far walkers, long of tail and long-handed, like wizened men children. Like wizened men children. Wizened men children. That's weird. Interesting. But people grew in strength and became more perfect, and more than ever went to war. They grew vain. They had reached the place of the middle. They said, "Let us not warily wander forth again, even though the earth tremble and the twain bid us forth." And even as they spoke, the mountain trembled and shook, though far sounding. But as the people changed also were the twain, small and misshapen, hard-favored and unyielding of will, strong of spirit, evil and bad. They taught the people to war and led them far to the eastward. At last the people neared the midst of the plains to the eastward, great towns built in the heights. Great were the fields and possessions of this people, for they knew how to command and carry the waters, bringing new soil. Sounds like Hohokam. Sounds like what they saw when they came over here to conquer the place. They said that the canal systems here in Tucson alone rivaled that of Mexico City. That was their very words. And this too without hail or rain. So our ancients, hungry with long wandering for new food, were the more greedy and often gave battle. So these destroyers wandered around following these twins, conquering these already established, beautiful ancient cities. Interesting. It was here that the ancient woman of the elder people, who carried her heart in her rattle and was deathless of wounds in the body, led the enemy, crying out shrilly. So it fell out ill for our fathers. For moreover, thunder raged and confused their warriors. Rain descended and blinded them, stretching their bowstrings of sinew and quenching the flight of their arrows as the flight of bees is quenched by the sprinkling plume of the honey hunter. But they devised bowstrings of yucca, and the two little ones sought counsel of the Sun Father, who revealed the secret of the ancient woman and the magic powers over the under fires of the dwellers of the mountains, so that our enemy in the mountain town was overmastered. And because our people found in that great town some hidden deep in cellars, and pulled them out as rats are pulled from a hollow cedar, and found them blackened by the fumes of their war magic, yet wiser than the common people, they spared them and received them into their next of kin of the black corn. Wow. So they saved them and tried to use them for their knowledge, huh? But the tremblings and warnings still sounded, and the people searched for the stable middle. Now they called a great council of men, and the beasts, birds, and insects of all kinds. After a long council, it was said, "Where is Waterscape? He has 6 legs, all very long. Perhaps he can feel with them to the uttermost of the 6 regions and point out the very middle." So Waterscape was summoned, but lo, it was the Sun Father in his likeness which appeared. And he lifted himself to the zenith and extended his finger feet to all the 6 regions, so that they touched the north, the great waters, the west, and the south, and the east, the great waters, and to the northeast the waters above, and to the southwest the waters below. But to the north his finger-foot grew cold, so he drew it in. Then gradually he settled down upon the earth and said, "Where my heart rests, make a spot, and build a town of the middlemost For there shall be the midmost place of the earth mother. And his heart rested over the middle of the plain and the valley of Zuni. And when he drew in his finger legs, lo, there were the trail roads leading out and in, like stays of a spider's nest, into and from the midmost place he had covered. Here, because of their good fortune in finding the stable middle, the priest father called the town the abiding place of happy fortune. So I've been looking at Google Earth, of course looking for this water skeeter figure, right? So the heart of Zuni Nation would be on this guy here, actually, who is not Yaitso. This dragon over here is Delgyed. Delgyed was the second monster that the monster slayers slay in the Navajo telling of the hero twins. The story I'm telling you now is the Zuni. Now, I'm going to have to do a whole nother one on the Navajo because they get into a little more detail about where these lightning bolts actually flew and which creatures were slain and where these creatures were slain even. So, I'm going to have to do a whole video on just the Navajo story of this. But I want to show you guys here. Conspiracy RS did a really great video just the other day on the melted buildings thing, right? And his was more about electrical arcing and the spherical balls that we find that might be from like electrical arcing, which is very, very cool theory. But this electrical arcing, okay, these hero twins, they harnessed the power of lightning. Okay, that's what their arrows were. Their arrows were thunderbolts. And all this area up here, I mean, that's what all of this is. This is electrical arcing. Okay, and it really, really makes sense scientifically looking at this story from a Are there satanic cobblers? What? Okay, I gotta go watch that one. Alright. Anyway, so scientifically looking at this story, when we apply electricity to mud or sand, okay, we get those really beautiful fulgurites. People make wind chimes out of them and stuff. So if you apply electricity to the dirt, it is going to harden it. It is. And if you think about it, someone else did they commented on the boot. Was it autodidactic? I think Cameron showed the boot. It was in another video. I'll have to go look for it. Anyway, someone commented that it could have been by lightning, because lightning, when people get struck by lightning, we have a lot of silica in our skin. That's what Roger from Mud Fossil keeps trying to tell us, kale and clay and silica. So if you blasted these creatures that were pretty much already made of, I think they had a more silicon structure than we do, even, because they said that the scales on these creatures were like stone. So, if they got hit with lightning, they would turn to stone. Scientifically, it makes sense, just like the story says. So I really find it frustrating that everybody's, running around in circles trying to figure out what happened. Okay, well, why don't we ask the people that were here? They sure do have some pretty cool stories to tell us. And if we look at them from a scientific perspective, guys, come on now. right? All the answers are there. So these twain, these hero twins that went around slaying all these monsters, there's another group of Pueblans over by Phoenix, and all these piles of rocks that we keep seeing everywhere, like the one on Signal Hill that I went to, it's like just a pile of rocks, right? Well, so is this area over here. There's what they call painted rocks, where, you know, I found that one that I scribbled all over for you, right? The natives here, the Pueblans, will take you there and tell you that that pile of rocks got there from when the great white god came down and upheaved this pile of rocks. And then when the ground stopped shaking, they started to record the stories that he told them. And on those rocks, they gave the keys of salvation, which is a very interesting way that they say it, because that is exactly how the Mormon Church says it. And the Mormon Church claims that the Book of Mormon is about the Native American lost tribes here, right? So here we have Native Americans that have the exact same stories as what it would have been if Jesus did visit here. So where I'm getting at with this now is really interesting, you guys, because when you read the scriptures of when Jesus visits anybody in his glorified body, it agitates them. That's the word it uses. It uses the word agitates. And I'm like, that's a, you know, it bothers them? No, it's not that it bothers them. It's vibrational, you guys. Okay, so all these, like the Inca stones and the polygonal stones, Charles Cause, I think, has figured that out. There are two ancient texts, one from Maya and one, I think, over from China that he found, where they're using a stone softening solution made of an herbal solution, some sort of plant-based herbal solution. They're soaking the stone in while they apply a sonic vibration. And after so long, it becomes pliable like clay. And then they can cut it and shape it and plop it into where they need to, and then it hardens back to where it needs to be. Well, if this was the building technique that they were using back then wouldn't it make sense that if we applied another vibration, an agitation to that stone, that it just might liquefy again? Because I've really been trying to figure this out, guys. I can see the melted buildings. I know they're there, okay? But you cannot apply heat to a brick and get a puddle of sandstone. You just can't do that. Chemically, that doesn't work. You can apply heat and get obsidian. You can make your own obsidian glass from lava rock. And I'm going to be experimenting to figure this out too, because I really don't think that heat is what has melted these. I think we're looking at something more vibrational. And it tells us right there in the books itself, you know, when he comes around, it agitates. The ground shakes, literally. We've got liquefaction happening here, you guys. I think that's the answer.